On the morning of January 8, 1994, U.S. President Bill Clinton was burying his mother. Only hours later, he boarded Air Force One heading to Moscow, on one of the most important diplomatic trips of his presidency. The goal? To convince Ukraine to voluntarily give up the world's third-largest nuclear arsenal. But the real story didn't begin in Moscow, nor in Washington. It began with an unplanned landing at Kyiv Airport, a landing driven by deep American concern that the Ukrainians might change their minds. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine inherited a massive nuclear arsenal. Bombs, missiles, warheads, enough power to deter any potential Russian aggression. But Washington had a different view. It sought to maintain a world where only the 5 recognized nuclear powers possessed nuclear weapons. It did not want new nuclear states emerging after the collapse of the Soviet Union. As for Ukraine, its nuclear status was a strategic inconvenience. Thus, Clinton began pushing for a trilateral agreement. Ukraine would hand its nuclear weapons over to Russia in exchange for economic support and security assurances. Ukrainians were deeply hesitant. For them, giving up nukes meant giving up their only guarantee against Russia. Yet, under simultaneous American and Russian pressure, Kyiv accepted. President Leonid Kravchuk promised to travel to Moscow on January 14th to sign the deal. But Washington wasn't convinced, so Clinton made an extraordinary decision. Instead of flying directly to Moscow, he ordered Air Force One to land in Kyiv, officially for refueling. But the real objective was simple: to make sure the Ukrainian government wouldn't back out at the last moment. Clinton entered the VIP lounge and immediately summoned Kravchuk. There, he realized his worst fears were true. Ukraine's leadership was split. Foreign Minister Anatoly Zelenko and National Security Advisor Batyuk were pressuring the president to reject the agreement. According to U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Strobe Talbot, at that moment, Clinton and his Secretary of State dropped all diplomacy and spoke to Kravchuk with unprecedented bluntness. Clinton threatened openly, if Ukraine backed out, it would lose the support of both the U.S. and Russia. At a time when the country was on the brink of economic collapse. Under pressure, Kravchuk submitted to the pressure, and issued a solemn assurance to maintain the agreement without modification. Clinton boarded the plane and continued to Moscow. 2 days later, Ukraine signed the agreement that would change its future forever. Between March and May 1994, the process began. Deactivation of all intercontinental ballistic missiles. Dismantling of launch systems. Transfer of more than 180 nuclear warheads to Russia. By giving up its nuclear arsenal, Ukraine lost the only deterrent capable of restraining Moscow. For that reason, Kyiv insisted on clear security guarantees. The US, UK, and Russia offered what became known as the Budapest Memorandum, December 1994. But they were not real guarantees, only written promises, without enforcement or consequences. Which is why they did not stop Russia from seizing Crimea in 2014, nor from invading all of Ukraine in 2022. In short, the Budapest Memorandum was a worthless guarantee. Bill Clinton himself later admitted the Ukrainians were right. In a 2023 interview,
they were afraid to give them up because they thought that's the only thing that protected them from an expansionist Russia. So he gave them up. President Putin broke it and first took Crimea. And I feel terrible about it because Ukraine is a very important country, and I feel a personal stake because I got them to agree to give up their nuclear weapons, and none of them believe that Russia would have pulled this stunt if Ukraine still had their weapons.
But admissions don't bring back missiles, they don't recover land, and they certainly don't restore the trust that was lost. Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky faces a disturbingly similar situation. New U.S. President Donald Trump says he can end the war with Russia in 24 hours. He said it during his campaign and repeated it after entering the White House in January 2025. But the war rages on, even after Trump has spent almost 11 months in the White House. During his attempts, Trump said last May, "This is not our war. Russians and Ukrainians, they're not our sons." Yet he cannot ignore the conflict, because its outcome will reshape Europe, and its consequences directly affect American interests. How is Trump trying to end the war? With a strategy completely opposite to Biden's: appeasing Russia, pressuring Ukraine, pushing Kyiv to accept Putin's terms. Because pressuring Ukraine, in his view, is easier than pressuring Moscow. And this led to the most dangerous development in the entire file. Last October, Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, were flying from Abu Dhabi to Miami. Their conversation shifted from Gaza to Ukraine. After 3 days of meetings with Putin's envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, a shocking first draft emerged, a 28-point peace plan, written as if Russia itself authored it. Next steps: it was presented to Ukraine's National Security Advisor. Then Witkoff and Kushner called Zelensky directly on November 16th. They read the points to him over the phone. Zelensky thanked them, but immediately understood how highly risky the plan was. 2 days later, they were supposed to present it to him in Turkey, but the meeting never happened. Then came the unexpected. The entire plan was leaked to Axios. And once it spread, the world was stunned, because the plan was, quite simply, a full surrender to Russia, and because history seemed to be repeating itself. The leaked plan included highly dangerous terms, the most notable being U.S. recognition of the territories Russia controls as facts on the ground, gradual lifting of economic sanctions on Moscow, and allowing Russia to rejoin the G7 as a normal member, imposing a full ceasefire without the U.S. or its allies providing any real security guarantees to protect Ukraine in the future, binding Ukraine to neutrality, permanently banning its membership in NATO or any new military alliances, forcing Ukrainian forces to withdraw from several strategic fronts, and handing gray zones to temporary Russian administration, reopening trade and energy ties with Russia under terms dictated by Moscow, detailed provisions ensuring the U.S. recovers all the money it spent during the war, whether as debt or long-term economic obligations imposed on Kyiv. Ukraine has a long history with American promises. They promised guarantees in 1994, abandoned Ukraine in 2014, avoided direct intervention in 2022. And now, a new administration is pressuring Kyiv to accept a Russia-tailored peace plan. This is not just about former nuclear weapons, it is about the future of a nation forced, twice, to make existential decisions under pressure. The real question today is, can Ukraine trust the United States again? Or does the lesson of 1994 still echo loudly? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support the video so it reaches the widest audience possible.